Have you ever wondered what happens to you when you fall asleep? I mean, really wondered about it. Not just where your body goes or what your brain does, but where you go. That essential part of you that experiences, thinks, and feels. Does it simply switch off like a computer, or does something far more mysterious happen every single night? What if I told you that some of the world's brightest scientists, philosophers, and researchers are asking the exact same question, and their findings might completely change how you think about sleep, dreams, and consciousness itself? Tonight, when you lay your head on your pillow and drift into that strange twilight between waking and sleeping, you might be embarking on a journey that's far more extraordinary than you ever imagined. A journey that could involve your consciousness literally separating from your physical body. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like something out of a science fiction movie or some new age mystical nonsense. But here's the thing, the research I'm about to share with you comes from legitimate neuroscience labs, sleep research centers, and consciousness studies programs at some of the most prestigious universities in the world. We're not talking about pseudoscience here. We're talking about cutting edge research that's forcing scientists to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the nature of consciousness and sleep. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand why some researchers believe that consciousness might be far more flexible and mobile than we ever imagined. You'll discover the strange phenomena that people experience during certain sleep states that seem to defy our understanding of how the mind works. And you'll learn about experiments that suggest something truly remarkable might be happening to your awareness every single night. But first, let me tell you about Sarah, a perfectly ordinary woman from Denver who experienced something that changed her entire understanding of what it means to be conscious. Sarah was a skeptical accountant who didn't believe in anything she couldn't see on a spreadsheet. That changed one night when she found herself floating above her own body, watching herself sleep. She could see her husband next to her, the digital clock glowing red in the darkness, even the family cat curled up on the chair across the room. But here's the strangest part. She wasn't dreaming. She was completely aware, completely conscious, but somehow separate from her physical form. When she woke up the next morning, she could describe in perfect detail everything that had happened in her bedroom while she was asleep, things she couldn't possibly have known from her position lying in bed with her eyes closed. Sarah's experience isn't unique. Thousands of people around the world report similar phenomena. They describe leaving their bodies during sleep, traveling to distant locations, and returning with information they shouldn't have been able to obtain. Scientists used to dismiss these reports as hallucinations or false memories, but recent research is suggesting something far more intriguing might be at play. You see, the traditional view of consciousness has always been that it's produced by the brain, contained within the skull, and inseparable from our physical bodies. It's like thinking of consciousness as software running on the computer of your brain. When the computer shuts down, the software stops running. Simple, clean, and logical. But what if that model is wrong? What if consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but is instead received by it, like a radio picking up signals from a distant station? What if your brain is more like an antenna than a computer, tuning into consciousness rather than creating it? If that's the case, then it's possible that during certain states, particularly during sleep, that connection might become more flexible, allowing consciousness to operate independently of the physical brain. This idea isn't as radical as it sounds. Some of the most respected neuroscientists in the world are beginning to question whether consciousness is truly confined to the brain. Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon who spent decades studying the brain, had his worldview completely shattered when he experienced consciousness while his brain was essentially non functional during a coma. His experience led him to conclude that consciousness might be fundamental to the universe itself, not just a byproduct of neural activity. But let's get more specific about what happens during sleep. When you drift off each night, your brain goes through several distinct stages. In the deepest stages of sleep, your brain activity drops to its lowest levels. Your body becomes essentially paralyzed, your breathing slows, and your heart rate decreases. From a purely physical standpoint, you're about as close to being unconscious as possible while still being alive. Yet, this is precisely when some of the most extraordinary consciousness related phenomena occur. People report out of body experiences during deep sleep. They describe lucid dreams, where they're completely aware they're dreaming and can control the dream environment. Some even claim to have shared dreams, where multiple people experience the same dream scenario simultaneously. The question becomes, if consciousness is truly just brain activity, how can people have such vivid, detailed, and sometimes verifiable experiences when their brain activity is at its lowest point? It's like expecting your smartphone to run complex apps while the processor is barely functioning. This paradox has led researchers to explore some fascinating possibilities. One theory suggests that during sleep, particularly during REM sleep, the brain's normal filtering mechanisms are reduced. Think of your waking consciousness as looking through a narrow window. Your brain filters out most information to help you focus on immediate survival needs like finding food, avoiding danger, and social interactions. But during sleep, that window might open wider, much wider. Some researchers propose that consciousness, freed from the constraints of maintaining physical awareness, might be able to access information and experiences that are normally filtered out. This could explain why people sometimes report accessing knowledge during dreams that they didn't consciously possess, or having experiences that seem to transcend the boundaries of time and space. There's also the intriguing research being conducted on what scientists call non local consciousness. Non local simply means not confined to a specific location. In quantum physics, particles can exhibit non local properties, influencing each other instantaneously across vast distances. Some researchers are investigating whether consciousness might have similar non local properties. Dr. Dean Radin, a researcher at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, has conducted experiments suggesting that consciousness might be able to access information that's physically distant from the brain. In controlled laboratory settings, people have demonstrated the ability to perceive events happening in distant locations, to influence random number generators through intention alone, and to access information that should be impossible to obtain through normal sensory channels. If consciousness does have non local properties, then the idea of it leaving the body during sleep becomes less mystical and more scientific. It would simply be consciousness operating according to its natural properties, freed from the constraints of maintaining moment to moment awareness of the physical body. But let's examine the brain itself during these experiences. When people report out of body experiences, what's actually happening in their neural tissue? Brain imaging studies have shown some fascinating patterns. During reported out of body experiences, there's often decreased activity in the temporal parietal junction, an area of the brain that's crucial for maintaining your sense of body ownership and spatial awareness. It's as if the brain region responsible for keeping you anchored to your physical location temporarily goes offline. At the same time, other areas associated with visual processing and memory formation often show increased activity. It's like your brain is reallocating resources, reducing its investment in maintaining physical awareness while boosting its capacity for visual and experiential processing. This neurological evidence suggests that out of body experiences aren't just imagination or hallucination. There are real, measurable changes happening in the brain during these states. The question is whether these changes represent consciousness malfunctioning or whether they represent consciousness operating in a different mode, one that's less constrained by physical limitations. Consider also the phenomenon of terminal lucidity. This occurs when people who have been unconscious or in cognitive decline for extended periods suddenly become completely lucid and aware just before death. Their consciousness seems to return in full force, even though their brain function has been severely compromised for months or years. From the traditional view of consciousness as brain based, this shouldn't be possible. A severely damaged brain shouldn't suddenly be able to produce crystal clear awareness. But if consciousness isn't entirely dependent on the brain, if it can operate somewhat independently, then terminal lucidity makes perfect sense. It would represent consciousness preparing to fully separate from the physical body. The implications of this research extend far beyond just understanding sleep. If consciousness can indeed operate independently of the brain, even temporarily, it would revolutionize our understanding of human nature itself. It would suggest that you are not just your physical body, not just the collection of atoms and molecules that make up your tissue and organs. Instead, you might be something far more mysterious and magnificent. You might be a conscious entity that's temporarily inhabiting a physical form, using your brain as a sophisticated interface for navigating the physical world. And every night, during the vulnerable hours of sleep, that interface might relax its control, allowing your consciousness to explore realms of experience that are normally hidden from your waking awareness. This possibility is both thrilling and unsettling. Thrilling because it suggests that human consciousness might be far more expansive and capable than we've ever imagined. Unsettling because it challenges some of our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality and our place in it. The research is still emerging, still evolving, and still controversial. Not all scientists accept these ideas, and healthy skepticism is important in any scientific inquiry. But the evidence is accumulating from multiple sources, multiple methodologies, and multiple research centers around the world. What we're beginning to see is a picture of consciousness that's far more complex, far more mysterious, and far more wonderful than the simple brain equals mind equation we've lived with for so long. And at the center of this mystery is something you do every single night without thinking about it. Something so ordinary, you take it completely for granted: sleep. But what if sleep isn't the simple, unconscious state we've always assumed it to be? What if it's actually a doorway, a portal, a launching pad for consciousness to explore realms of experience that are impossible during normal waking hours? What if every night, as your body lies motionless in bed, the essential you embarks on journeys that would make the greatest explorers in history envious? To understand what might be happening to your consciousness during sleep, we need to look at some of the most puzzling cases that researchers have documented. Take the story of Maria, a migrant worker who was rushed to a Seattle hospital after a heart attack. During her cardiac arrest, she was clinically dead for several minutes. Her brain showed no activity, her heart had stopped, and by all medical definitions, she was gone. But Maria later described something impossible. She said she had floated out of her body and drifted upward, eventually finding herself outside the hospital building. There, on a third floor window ledge that was impossible to see from her room, she observed a single tennis shoe. She described it in remarkable detail, down to the worn shoelace and a scuff mark on the toe. When hospital staff investigated, they found the shoe exactly as Maria had described it, in a location she had never been to, couldn't have seen from her hospital bed, and had no way of knowing about. This case, documented by Dr. Kimberly Clark, represents just one of hundreds of similar reports that have emerged from medical facilities around the world. These aren't sleep experiences, but they point to something profound about the nature of consciousness that might also apply to what happens during our nightly rest. If consciousness can somehow observe events from locations outside the physical body during near death experiences, what's stopping it from doing the same thing during the altered states we enter every night? The answer might lie in understanding what researchers call the consciousness spectrum. Rather than thinking of consciousness as simply on or off, awake or asleep, scientists are discovering that awareness exists along a complex spectrum with many different levels and states. Your normal waking consciousness is just one point on this spectrum. Deep dreamless sleep is another. But in between, there are dozens of other states that we're only beginning to understand. Some of these states seem to allow for what researchers term expanded awareness. People report accessing information they shouldn't have, experiencing events from perspectives that should be impossible, and sometimes even interacting with other conscious entities in shared experiential spaces. Dr. Robert Monroe, an audio engineer who became fascinated by consciousness research, spent decades documenting his own out of body experiences during sleep and meditation. What started as a personal curiosity evolved into rigorous scientific investigation at his research institute in Virginia. Monroe developed techniques for inducing these states reliably and began training others to have similar experiences. What Monroe and his researchers discovered was that these experiences weren't random or chaotic. They followed consistent patterns and seemed to occur in identifiable dimensions or levels of reality. Participants would report visiting the same locations, meeting the same entities, and bringing back similar types of information. It was as if consciousness, when freed from physical constraints, could access organized realms of experience that exist parallel to our normal reality. The implications become even more intriguing when we consider the phenomenon of shared dreaming. Multiple people, sometimes sleeping in different locations, report having identical or nearly identical dream experiences. They describe the same landscapes, the same events, sometimes even the same conversations with dream characters. In controlled laboratory settings, researchers have documented cases where test subjects, sleeping in separate rooms with no way to communicate, have reported remarkably similar dream content. The statistical probability of such coincidences occurring by chance is astronomically low. This suggests that during certain sleep states, individual consciousnesses might be accessing shared experiential spaces. But how could this be possible if consciousness is confined to the brain? The answer might lie in understanding consciousness not as something produced by your brain, but as something your brain connects to. Think of it like this: your radio doesn't create the music you hear. It receives radio waves that exist independently in the environment and converts them into audible sound. Similarly, your brain might not create consciousness, but rather tune into it, decode it, and present it to you as your personal experience of being aware. If this model is correct, then during sleep, when your brain's normal filtering and processing systems are reduced, you might be able to tune in to broader ranges of consciousness. Just as turning the dial on your radio can pick up distant stations, altering your brain state through sleep might allow you to access forms of awareness that are normally beyond your reach. This concept aligns with some of the most cutting edge research in neuroscience. Studies using advanced brain imaging techniques have shown that consciousness doesn't seem to be localized in any single brain region. Instead, it appears to emerge from complex networks of neural activity that span multiple areas of the brain simultaneously. Even more intriguingly, some studies suggest that conscious experience might actually precede the neural activity that's supposed to cause it. In experiments measuring brain responses to stimuli, researchers have found that people sometimes show signs of conscious awareness before the corresponding neural activity appears in their brains. It's as if consciousness is anticipating what the brain is about to do, rather than being created by brain activity. Dr. Amit Goswami, a quantum physicist who has spent decades studying consciousness, proposes that consciousness is the fundamental ground of all being. In his model, consciousness doesn't emerge from matter, matter emerges from consciousness. The physical world, including our brains, is a projection or manifestation of conscious awareness, not the source of it. If Goswami and similar researchers are correct, then the idea of consciousness leaving the body during sleep isn't mystical at all. It's simply consciousness operating according to its true nature, temporarily freed from the task of maintaining a stable interface with physical reality. This perspective is supported by research into what happens during different stages of sleep. During REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, your brain shows activity patterns that are remarkably similar to waking consciousness. Yet your body is completely paralyzed, and you're often experiencing realities that are entirely different from your physical surroundings. Where is this dream reality taking place? If it's just neural activity in your brain, why does it feel so real, so detailed, and so experientially rich. Some researchers suggest that dream realities might be actual experiential dimensions that consciousness can access when not constrained by physical awareness. The ancient traditions have long recognized this possibility. Tibetan Buddhism describes detailed maps of consciousness states that can be accessed during sleep and meditation. Hindu philosophy speaks of multiple bodies or sheaths of existence, with the physical body being just the outermost layer. Indigenous shamanic traditions worldwide describe techniques for soul travel and consciousness projection that are remarkably similar to modern reports of out of body experiences. What's fascinating is that these ancient teachings, developed thousands of years before modern neuroscience, describe phenomena that closely match what contemporary researchers are now documenting in laboratory settings. It's as if humanity has always known, at some deep level, that consciousness is far more flexible and expansive than our modern materialist worldview suggests. But we don't need to rely solely on ancient wisdom or anecdotal reports. Modern technology is providing new ways to study these phenomena objectively. Researchers are using EEG machines to monitor brain activity during reported out of body experiences. They're employing sophisticated statistical analysis to study cases of shared dreaming. They're even developing devices that might allow people to communicate while in altered states of consciousness. The results are preliminary but intriguing. Brainwave patterns during out of body experiences show distinct signatures that are different from both normal waking consciousness and ordinary dreaming. These patterns suggest that something genuinely different is happening in the brain during these states, something that might correspond to consciousness operating in an expanded mode. Perhaps most remarkably, some researchers are finding ways to induce these experiences reliably. Through combinations of meditation techniques, sound frequencies, and even electromagnetic stimulation of specific brain regions, they're helping people access states where consciousness seems to operate independently of normal physical constraints. The technology is still in its infancy, but the implications are staggering. If we can learn to access these states reliably, it might revolutionize everything from education to therapy to our understanding of human potential itself. Imagine being able to explore realms of experience that are normally hidden, to access information that's beyond the reach of your physical senses, to connect with other consciousnesses in ways that transcend the limitations of time and space. But perhaps the most profound implication is what this means for your personal experience of being human. Every night, as you surrender to sleep, you might be participating in one of the greatest adventures possible. Your consciousness, freed from the constraints of maintaining physical awareness, might be exploring dimensions of reality that are vast beyond imagination. The person you think you are, the collection of thoughts and memories and sensations that you identify as yourself, might be just the tip of an iceberg. The vast majority of your true nature might exist in realms that you glimpse only briefly during dreams and altered states, realms that become accessible when your consciousness is no longer bound by the narrow focus required for physical survival. This isn't just philosophical speculation anymore. It's becoming a legitimate area of scientific inquiry, with researchers at major universities conducting studies that would have been considered impossible just a few decades ago. We're living through a revolution in consciousness research that might ultimately transform our understanding of what it means to be human. And at the center of this revolution is something you do every single night. Something so ordinary, so automatic, that you probably never give it a second thought. But what if sleep isn't the unconscious void we've always assumed it to be? What if it's actually the most conscious thing you do, the time when your true nature is finally free to express itself without the limitations imposed by physical existence? The evidence keeps mounting from unexpected sources. Consider the work being done at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, where researchers have been quietly documenting cases of children who remember previous lives with startling accuracy. These aren't just vague memories or wishful thinking. These children provide specific names, addresses, and details about people and places they've never encountered in their current lives. What makes these cases particularly relevant to our discussion is that many of these memories first emerge during sleep. Children wake up from dreams, speaking in languages they've never learned, describing locations they've never visited, and calling for family members who died before they were born. It's as if sleep provides a window into forms of consciousness that extend far beyond the boundaries of a single lifetime. Dr. Ian Stevenson, who pioneered this research, documented over 3,000 such cases. What struck him most wasn't just the accuracy of the memories, but the fact that they often came through dreams and sleep states. It was as if consciousness, during its nightly journeys, sometimes accessed memories that belonged to entirely different individuals. This phenomenon challenges our most basic assumptions about the continuity of consciousness. If awareness can access memories from other lives during sleep, what does that tell us about the true nature of what we call the self? Perhaps the boundaries between individual consciousnesses are far more fluid than we imagine, and sleep is when those boundaries become most permeable. The implications become even more fascinating when we look at what researchers call crisis apparitions. These are cases where people appear to loved ones in dreams or visions at the moment of their death, often conveying final messages or simply saying goodbye. The person experiencing the vision typically has no way of knowing that their loved one has died until they receive confirmation hours or days later. Dr. Erlendur Haraldsson, a psychology professor in Iceland, has collected hundreds of such cases from around the world. What's remarkable is the consistency of these reports across different cultures and time periods. People describe seeing deceased relatives with perfect clarity during sleep, receiving specific information about their death, and waking with an absolute certainty that something significant has happened. From a conventional scientific perspective, these experiences should be impossible. How can consciousness access information about events happening hundreds or thousands of miles away? How can someone who has died appear to communicate with the living? Unless consciousness operates according to principles we don't yet fully understand. The quantum physics connection becomes increasingly relevant here. In quantum mechanics, particles can be entangled, meaning they remain connected across any distance. When something happens to one particle, its entangled partner responds instantaneously, regardless of how far apart they are. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, and it troubled him because it seemed to violate the speed of light barrier. But quantum entanglement is now an established scientific fact. Particles do maintain these mysterious connections across space and time. Some researchers are exploring whether consciousness might exhibit similar properties. If human awareness can become entangled with other consciousnesses, it would explain how information can be shared between minds during sleep states. Dr. Russell Targ, a physicist who worked on remote viewing programs for the CIA, has conducted thousands of experiments demonstrating that consciousness can access distant information. In controlled laboratory conditions, test subjects have repeatedly shown the ability to describe locations, objects, and events that are physically impossible for them to perceive through normal sensory channels. What's particularly relevant to our exploration is that these abilities often work best when subjects are in relaxed, meditative, or sleep like states. It's as if consciousness needs to be freed from the constraints of normal waking awareness to access its more expansive capabilities. The research suggests that during sleep, when your brain's normal filtering mechanisms are reduced, you might naturally enter states similar to those that remote viewers train years to achieve. Every night, without any effort on your part, you might be accessing forms of awareness that psychic researchers spend decades trying to develop. But let's get more personal. Have you ever had a dream that felt more real than reality itself? A dream where you were completely convinced you were awake, where every sensation was vivid and detailed, where you could think clearly and make decisions just as you would in waking life. These are called lucid dreams, and they represent one of the most intriguing aspects of sleep consciousness. During lucid dreams, you become aware that you're dreaming while still remaining in the dream state. This creates a unique form of consciousness where you're simultaneously asleep and awake, dreaming and aware. You can often control the dream environment, fly through imaginary landscapes, or have conversations with dream characters who seem to possess their own independent personalities and knowledge. What's remarkable about lucid dreaming is that brain imaging studies show patterns of neural activity that are unlike either normal waking consciousness or regular dreaming. It's as if the brain enters a hybrid state that combines elements of both sleep and waking awareness. Some researchers suggest this might represent consciousness operating in its most natural, unrestricted form. Dr. Stephen LaBerge at Stanford University has spent decades studying lucid dreaming in laboratory settings. His research has shown that people can learn to become lucid in their dreams consistently, and that lucid dreamers can communicate with researchers through predetermined eye movements while remaining asleep. They can perform specific tasks, solve problems, and even practice skills that carry over into their waking lives. This research reveals something profound about the nature of consciousness during sleep. If you can think clearly, make decisions, and learn new information while dreaming, what does that say about the relationship between consciousness and the physical brain? It suggests that awareness might be far more independent of brain activity than we typically assume. The phenomenon of shared lucid dreaming takes this even further. Multiple people report having lucid dreams where they encounter each other and engage in detailed conversations or shared experiences. When they wake up and compare their dream reports, they often describe identical scenarios, conversations, and interactions. Dr. Claire Johnson, a lucid dreaming researcher, has documented numerous cases of mutual dreaming where two or more people share the same dream experience. The statistical probability of such detailed coincidences occurring by chance is virtually zero. This suggests that consciousness during lucid dreaming might be accessing shared experiential spaces that exist independently of individual brains. Consider also the healing potential of these expanded states of consciousness. There are documented cases of people receiving medical information in dreams that later proves to be accurate. Others report dream encounters with deceased relatives who provide comfort and guidance during difficult times. Some even describe learning new skills or accessing creative inspiration that transforms their waking lives. Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, claimed to access medical and philosophical information while in trance states. Over the course of his lifetime, he gave over 14,000 documented readings while unconscious, providing detailed medical diagnoses and treatments for people he had never met. Many of his suggestions proved remarkably accurate, and some of the treatments he recommended weren't accepted by mainstream medicine until decades later. Whether or not you accept Casey's claims, his case raises fascinating questions about what kinds of information consciousness might be able to access during altered states. If awareness can somehow tap into knowledge that the conscious mind doesn't possess, it would suggest that consciousness is connected to much larger information systems than we typically imagine. The neuroscience of these phenomena is still being explored, but researchers are finding that the brain, during deep sleep and altered states, shows connectivity patterns that are very different from normal waking consciousness. Networks that are usually separate begin communicating with each other. Areas of the brain that typically inhibit each other start working together. It's as if sleep allows the brain to reorganize itself into configurations that are impossible during normal waking hours. Dr. Enzo Tagliazucci, a neuroscientist who studies consciousness during altered states, has found that psychedelic experiences and certain sleep states show remarkably similar brain activity patterns. Both involve a breakdown of the normal boundaries between different brain networks, leading to what he calls increased neural connectivity. This increased connectivity might correspond to the expanded awareness that people report during these states. The default mode network, a collection of brain regions that's active when you're not focused on any particular task, also behaves differently during sleep and altered states. This network is associated with your sense of self, your autobiographical memories, and your feeling of being a separate individual. When the default mode network becomes less active, people often report feelings of unity, expanded awareness, and connection to something larger than themselves. This suggests that your normal sense of being a separate, isolated individual might actually be maintained by specific patterns of brain activity. When those patterns change during sleep, your consciousness might naturally expand beyond the boundaries of individual selfhood. You might temporarily merge with larger fields of awareness that are normally hidden from your waking experience. The implications are staggering. If consciousness is indeed more expansive and interconnected than we assume, then every night you might be participating in a vast network of awareness that connects all conscious beings. Your dreams might not be private, isolated experiences, but rather interactions within a shared conscious space that exists parallel to physical reality. This possibility is supported by research into collective unconscious phenomena. Dr. Russell Targ and others have documented cases where groups of people, even when separated by great distances, seem to share similar dreams and visions during times of crisis or significant events. It's as if consciousness has a collective dimension that becomes more accessible during sleep states. The research is still emerging, and there's much we don't understand. But what's becoming clear is that consciousness during sleep is far more active, far more aware, and far more connected than we ever imagined. The old model of sleep as simply unconsciousness is giving way to a new understanding of sleep as a gateway to expanded states of awareness. Every night, as you close your eyes and surrender to sleep, you might be embarking on journeys that are more real, more meaningful, and more transformative than anything you experience during your waking hours. Your consciousness, freed from the task of maintaining physical awareness, might be exploring realms of existence that are vast beyond imagination. The person you think you are when you're awake might be just a small fraction of your true nature. The vast majority of who you really are might exist in dimensions of consciousness that you access only during sleep, dimensions where the boundaries between self and other, past and future, possible and impossible, become fluid and permeable. And tomorrow morning, when you wake up and return to normal consciousness, you might be bringing back just the faintest echoes of adventures that would make the greatest explorers in history weep with envy. Adventures that happen not in distant lands or exotic locations, but in the infinite landscapes of consciousness itself. But what happens when we try to verify these extraordinary claims? This is where the science gets truly fascinating, because researchers have developed ingenious ways to test whether consciousness can actually access information beyond the confines of the physical brain during sleep. Dr. Charles Tart, a psychology professor at UC Davis, designed what became known as the target number experiment. He asked volunteers who claimed to have out of body experiences during sleep to try to read a randomly generated 5-digit number that was placed on a high shelf, impossible to see from their bed position. The participants would sleep in the laboratory while being monitored by EEG machines, and upon waking, they would report what number they had observed during their supposed out of body travels. The results were startling. While most attempts failed, some participants correctly identified the target numbers with accuracy rates that far exceeded chance. One subject, a young woman identified only as Miss Z, correctly identified the number on multiple occasions. The statistical probability of her success rate occurring by random guessing was less than 1 in a million. But here's what makes this even more intriguing. The EEG recordings showed that Miss Z's correct identifications occurred specifically during periods when her brain activity indicated she was in deep sleep, not during lighter sleep stages or moments of partial awakening. Her consciousness appeared to be gathering accurate information precisely when her brain was least active. Similar experiments have been conducted at research centers around the world with consistently puzzling results. The AWARE study, led by Dr. Sam Parnia at New York University, placed hidden visual targets in hospital rooms where cardiac arrest patients might have out of body experiences. While the study didn't produce definitive proof, several patients reported detailed observations of medical procedures that they shouldn't have been able to witness from their physical position. These controlled studies force us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Either consciousness has capabilities that our current scientific models can't explain, or there are fundamental flaws in how we understand the relationship between mind and brain. Both possibilities have profound implications for what might be happening to you every single night. Consider the work of Dr. William Buhlman, who has spent over 30 years researching out of body experiences and training people to have them intentionally. His techniques, which combine meditation, visualization, and specific sleep induction methods, have enabled thousands of people to report conscious experiences outside their physical bodies. What's remarkable about Bullman's work is the consistency of the reports he receives. People from different cultures, backgrounds, and belief systems describe remarkably similar experiences when they claim to separate from their physical bodies during sleep. They report traveling through what appears to be a parallel version of physical reality, but one with different rules and possibilities. Many describe encountering other conscious beings during these experiences, entities that seem to possess their own independent awareness and knowledge. These encounters often involve receiving information or guidance that proves helpful in the person's waking life. Skeptics might dismiss these as elaborate hallucinations, but the consistency and verifiability of some of the information received suggests something more complex might be occurring. The neurological evidence adds another layer to this mystery. Brain imaging studies of people during reported out of body experiences show a fascinating pattern. While overall brain activity decreases, certain regions associated with spatial awareness and visual processing actually become more active. It's as if the brain is reallocating resources, shutting down systems that maintain physical awareness while boosting areas that process visual and spatial information. Dr. Olaf Blanke at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology has identified specific brain regions that, when stimulated, can induce out of body like experiences. By applying electrical stimulation to the temporal parietal junction, he can make people feel as though they're floating outside their bodies or watching themselves from above. But here's the crucial question. Does stimulating these brain areas create the experience of being outside the body, or does it simply enable consciousness to access capabilities that are normally suppressed? The difference between these two possibilities is enormous. One suggests that out of body experiences are merely brain malfunctions, while the other suggests they represent consciousness operating according to its true nature. The answer might lie in understanding what researchers call the neural correlates of consciousness. These are the specific brain activity patterns that correspond to different types of conscious experience. What scientists are discovering is that the relationship between brain activity and consciousness is far more complex than anyone anticipated. During certain altered states, including some that occur naturally during sleep, consciousness seems to persist even when the brain regions traditionally associated with awareness show minimal activity. It's like finding that your car's radio continues playing even when the engine is turned off. This suggests that consciousness might not be as dependent on brain activity as we've always assumed. The implications become even more intriguing when we examine what happens to consciousness during anesthesia. Anesthetics are designed to eliminate consciousness by suppressing brain activity, yet some patients report vivid experiences while under general anesthesia. These experiences often involve traveling to distant locations, encountering deceased relatives, or receiving profound insights about their lives. Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist, conducted a landmark study of near death experiences in cardiac arrest patients. What he found challenged everything he thought he knew about consciousness. Patients who were clinically dead with no measurable brain activity later reported detailed, life changing experiences that occurred during the time when their brains were non functional. These weren't brief, fragmentary memories. They were rich, complex experiences involving encounters with beings of light, life reviews where patients experienced every moment of their lives from multiple perspectives, and visits to realms of existence that seemed more real than physical reality. Many patients returned with knowledge they hadn't possessed before their cardiac arrest, including information about distant events that occurred while they were unconscious. Van Lommel's research suggests that consciousness might continue to function even when the brain shows no signs of activity. If this is true, then the idea of consciousness leaving the body during sleep becomes not just possible, but probable. Sleep might simply represent a milder version of the same process that occurs during near death experiences. The quantum mechanics perspective adds yet another dimension to these mysteries. Quantum physicists have discovered that at the fundamental level of reality, particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed. The act of observation literally creates the reality we experience by collapsing quantum possibilities into definite outcomes. Some researchers propose that consciousness itself might operate according to quantum principles. Dr. Henry Stapp, a quantum physicist at UC Berkeley, suggests that consciousness is the mechanism by which quantum possibilities collapse into experienced reality. In his model, consciousness doesn't emerge from matter, but rather shapes matter by selecting which quantum possibilities become manifest. If consciousness operates according to quantum principles, it would explain many of the phenomena we've been discussing. Quantum systems can exist in multiple locations simultaneously, can influence each other instantaneously across vast distances, and can access information that seems to transcend normal space and time limitations. During sleep, when the brain's normal classical processing systems are reduced, consciousness might naturally shift into quantum modes of operation. This could allow awareness to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, to access information from distant sources, and to operate according to principles that seem impossible from a classical physics perspective. Dr. Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist and consciousness researcher, has proposed that consciousness emerges from quantum processes occurring in microscopic structures within brain cells called microtubules. His theory, developed in collaboration with mathematician Sir Roger Penrose, suggests that consciousness involves quantum computations that are far more sophisticated than anything possible with classical neural networks. If Hameroff and Penrose are correct, then your brain is essentially a biological quantum computer capable of processing information in ways that transcend the limitations of classical physics. During sleep, when normal neural processing is reduced, These quantum systems might operate more freely, allowing consciousness to access information and experiences that are normally filtered out. The evidence for quantum effects in biological systems has been growing rapidly. Researchers have found quantum processes in photosynthesis, bird navigation, and even the sense of smell. It's becoming clear that life has evolved to harness quantum effects for various purposes. Why should consciousness be any different? But let's bring this back to your personal experience. Have you ever had a dream where you solved a problem that had been troubling you for days or weeks? Have you ever awakened with a creative insight that seemed to come from nowhere? These experiences might represent your consciousness accessing information during sleep that's normally beyond the reach of your waking awareness. The history of science is filled with discoveries that came through dreams. Niels Bohr claimed that the structure of the atom came to him in a dream where he sat on the sun with electrons orbiting around him. Dmitri Mendeleev saw the complete periodic table in a dream after struggling with its organization for years. Tesla reported that many of his inventions came to him in dream states. These weren't just random neural firing producing lucky guesses. They were specific, detailed solutions to complex problems that required deep understanding of natural principles. It's as if consciousness, during sleep, can access information from sources that are unavailable to the waking mind. The therapeutic implications of this research are profound. If consciousness can indeed access expanded states during sleep, it might be possible to develop techniques that enhance these natural abilities. Some researchers are already exploring ways to optimize sleep states for problem solving, creativity, and healing. Dr. Deirdre Barrett at Harvard Medical School has developed techniques for using dreams to solve specific problems. Her research shows that people can learn to direct their dreams toward particular challenges and often wake up with novel solutions. The process involves focusing on the problem before sleep and setting the intention to dream about possible solutions. What's fascinating is that the solutions people receive in dreams are often more creative and innovative than anything they could generate through normal waking thought processes. It's as if consciousness, freed from the constraints of logical thinking, can explore solution spaces that are normally inaccessible. The implications extend beyond individual problem solving to collective human challenges. If consciousness can access shared information during sleep states, it might be possible for groups of people to work together on problems while dreaming. Some researchers are exploring whether collective dreaming could be harnessed for scientific discovery, artistic creation, or even conflict resolution. Imagine if teams of researchers could meet in shared dream states to collaborate on complex problems. Imagine if artists could create together in dream realms where the normal laws of physics don't apply. Imagine if world leaders could engage in dream diplomacy where ego barriers are reduced and deeper understanding becomes possible. These possibilities might sound like science fiction, but they're based on phenomena that thousands of people report experiencing spontaneously. The question isn't whether these experiences occur, but whether we can understand and harness them systematically. The research is advancing rapidly, driven by new technologies and growing scientific acceptance of consciousness studies. Brain imaging techniques are becoming more sophisticated, allowing researchers to observe the brain with unprecedented detail during various sleep states. Virtual reality systems are being developed that might allow people to share dreamlike experiences while awake. Some researchers are even exploring whether artificial intelligence systems might eventually be able to interface with human consciousness during sleep states. The possibility of human AI collaboration in dream realms opens up possibilities that are difficult to imagine from our current perspective. But perhaps the most important implication of this research is what it suggests about your own untapped potential. Every night as you fall asleep, you might be gaining access to capabilities that are far beyond what you experience during normal waking consciousness. Your sleeping mind might be capable of feats that would seem miraculous from a waking perspective. The challenge is learning to remember and integrate these experiences into your conscious life. Most people wake up with only fragments of their dream experiences, if anything at all. But techniques are being developed to enhance dream recall and to maintain greater awareness during sleep states. Lucid dreaming training, dream journaling, and various meditation practices can help you become more conscious during sleep and better able to remember your experiences upon waking. Some people report that with practice, they can maintain a thread of awareness throughout the entire night, experiencing sleep not as unconsciousness, but as an alternate form of consciousness. The implications ripple outward into every aspect of human experience. If consciousness is indeed more expansive and capable than we've assumed, it might explain many phenomena that science has struggled to understand. Intuition, creativity, telepathic experiences, precognitive dreams, spontaneous healing, and even mystical experiences might all represent consciousness accessing its fuller capabilities. This research is also reshaping our understanding of death and what might happen to consciousness when the physical body can no longer sustain life. If consciousness can operate independently of the brain, even temporarily during sleep, it raises profound questions about whether awareness might continue after physical death. The near death experience research suggests that consciousness might not only survive the death of the body, but might actually expand and clarify when freed from physical constraints. The reports from people who have had these experiences describe not loss of awareness, but enhancement of it, not confusion, but clarity, not diminishment, but expansion. What we're discovering about consciousness during sleep might be preparing us for a much larger understanding of human nature and human potential. We might be on the verge of a revolution in consciousness research that will transform not just science and medicine, but our entire understanding of what it means to be human. And it all begins with something you do every single night, something so ordinary that you probably never considered its profound implications. Sleep might not be the simple, unconscious state we've always assumed it to be. It might be the most conscious thing you do, the time when your true nature finally has the freedom to express itself without the limitations of physical existence. The journey into sleep, which you'll take again tonight, might be a journey into the deepest mysteries of consciousness itself. A journey that reveals not just what happens when you close your eyes, but what you truly are when all the familiar boundaries of waking life finally fall away. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you're standing at the threshold of what might be the most significant journey of your day. But before you cross that threshold, there's something else you need to understand about the nature of consciousness during sleep that could fundamentally change how you experience your nightly rest. Consider the phenomenon that researchers call sleep paralysis, but approach it from an entirely different angle than you might expect. Most people who experience sleep paralysis describe it as terrifying, a state where they're conscious but unable to move, often accompanied by disturbing hallucinations. But what if sleep paralysis isn't a malfunction at all? What if it's actually a window into the natural process of consciousness separation that occurs every night? A process that usually happens so smoothly you never notice it? Dr. Jorge Coneza Sevilla, a psychologist who specializes in sleep paralysis research, has documented thousands of cases where people report profound spiritual and transcendent experiences during these episodes. Instead of fear, many describe feelings of expansion, unity, and access to knowledge that seems to come from beyond their individual minds. They report encounters with benevolent entities, visions of distant places, and insights that transform their understanding of reality. What makes this particularly relevant is that sleep paralysis occurs during the transition between sleep and waking, precisely when the normal boundaries between consciousness and the physical body are most fluid. It's as if people experiencing sleep paralysis are catching a glimpse of the consciousness separation process that normally happens below the threshold of awareness. The neurological explanation for sleep paralysis involves the temporary persistence of REM sleep muscle atonia while consciousness returns to near waking levels. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. Why does consciousness sometimes return while the body remains in sleep mode? What determines whether someone experiences this as terrifying or transcendent? The answer might lie in expectation and preparation. People who approach sleep paralysis with curiosity rather than fear often report very different experiences. They describe learning to navigate these states consciously, using them as launching points for out of body experiences or as opportunities to explore expanded states of awareness. This suggests something profound about the relationship between consciousness and sleep. If you can learn to work with these transitional states rather than fighting them, you might gain access to experiences that are normally hidden from conscious awareness. Sleep paralysis might actually be an invitation to explore the deeper mysteries of consciousness, not a disorder to be avoided. The implications extend to the broader question of consciousness training. If awareness can indeed operate independently of the physical body during sleep, then it might be possible to develop this capacity intentionally. Some traditions have recognized this for thousands of years. Tibetan dream yoga, for example, includes detailed instructions for maintaining awareness throughout all stages of sleep. The practice involves learning to recognize the dream state while dreaming, then using that recognition as a foundation for exploring what Tibetan practitioners call the clear light of sleep, a state of pure awareness that exists beyond both dreaming and ordinary unconsciousness. Advanced practitioners report being able to maintain continuous consciousness throughout the entire sleep cycle, never losing awareness even during the deepest stages of sleep. What's remarkable is that modern sleep research is beginning to validate some of these ancient claims, Studies using advanced EEG monitoring have found that experienced meditators can maintain certain types of awareness, even during deep sleep stages that normally involve complete unconsciousness. Their brain activity shows patterns that are unlike either normal sleep or normal waking consciousness, suggesting they're accessing states that are genuinely different from anything most people experience. Dr. Michael Raduga, a researcher who studies controlled out of body experiences, has developed systematic techniques for inducing conscious separation from the body during sleep. His methods, which he calls the phase, combine elements of lucid dreaming, out of body experience induction, and wake initiated lucid dreaming. Participants in his workshops report success rates of over 70% in achieving conscious experiences outside their physical bodies. What makes Raduga's work particularly intriguing is his emphasis on the practical applications of these states. Rather than treating them as spiritual or mystical phenomena, he approaches them as natural capabilities of consciousness that can be developed and used for specific purposes. People report using these states for problem solving, creativity, healing, and even gathering information that proves accurate in waking life. The verification aspect is crucial because it moves the discussion beyond subjective experience into the realm of objective investigation. When someone claims to have traveled consciously to a distant location during sleep and returns with accurate information about that place, we have to seriously consider the possibility that consciousness can indeed operate beyond the confines of the physical brain. Dr. Melvin Morse, a pediatrician who has studied near death experiences in children, has documented cases where young patients accurately described events that occurred in distant hospital rooms while they were unconscious. Children who had never left their hospital beds provided detailed descriptions of conversations between family members in waiting areas, described the contents of rooms they had never seen, and even accurately reported on medical procedures happening to other patients. These cases are particularly compelling because children are less likely to have preconceived notions about what's possible or impossible. Their reports are often more straightforward and detailed than adult accounts, and they're less likely to be influenced by cultural beliefs about consciousness and the afterlife. The consistency of these reports across different age groups, cultures, and circumstances suggests that we're dealing with a genuine phenomenon rather than wishful thinking or cultural conditioning. Something remarkable appears to be happening to consciousness during certain altered states, something that challenges our most basic assumptions about the nature of awareness and its relationship to the physical brain. But let's consider the implications for your everyday sleep experience. Even if you never have a dramatic out of body experience or a verifiable encounter with consciousness operating outside your body, the research suggests that every night you're participating in something far more mysterious and significant than you might realize. Your dreams, even the mundane ones, might represent your consciousness exploring dimensions of experience that are normally inaccessible. That strange dream where you were flying through impossible landscapes might not be just random neural firing, but your awareness exploring realms where the normal laws of physics don't apply. That dream conversation with someone you've never met might not be just imagination, but an actual encounter with another consciousness in a shared experiential space. The creative insights that sometimes come through dreams, the problem solutions that appear overnight, the emotional healing that occurs during sleep, all of these might represent your consciousness accessing capabilities that are far beyond what you experience during normal waking hours. Sleep might be your nightly opportunity to tap into the deeper potentials of awareness itself. This perspective transforms sleep from a passive state of rest into an active state of exploration. Instead of simply losing consciousness for 8 hours, you might be gaining access to forms of consciousness that are richer, more expansive, and more connected than anything available during waking life. The research on sleep learning adds another dimension to this picture. Studies have shown that people can learn new information during certain stages of sleep, that they can form new memories while unconscious, and that they can even be influenced by external stimuli without waking up. This suggests that consciousness during sleep is far more active and receptive than we typically assume. But the learning that occurs during sleep might extend far beyond simple information absorption. If consciousness can indeed access expanded states during sleep, then every night might be an opportunity for growth, healing, and transformation that goes far beyond what's possible during waking hours. You might be learning not just facts and skills, but developing capabilities of awareness itself. The therapeutic applications of this understanding are just beginning to be explored. Some researchers are investigating whether guided dream experiences might be more effective than traditional therapy for certain psychological conditions. Others are exploring whether people can use sleep states to accelerate healing from physical injuries or illnesses. The preliminary results are intriguing. People who learn to work consciously with their sleep states often report improvements in both physical and emotional well being that exceed what they achieve through conventional treatments. It's as if consciousness, when allowed to operate in its expanded sleep modes, has access to healing resources that are normally unavailable. Dr. Patricia Garfield, a psychologist who has spent decades studying dreams across different cultures, has found that people who develop conscious relationships with their sleep states often experience profound transformations in their waking lives. They report increased creativity, better problem solving abilities, enhanced intuition, and a greater sense of connection to something larger than themselves. These changes aren't just subjective improvements in mood or outlook. They often manifest as measurable enhancements in performance, health, and life satisfaction. It's as if learning to work with consciousness during sleep unlocks potentials that remain dormant when sleep is treated as merely unconscious rest. The implications ripple outward into questions about human evolution and potential. If consciousness does have capabilities that extend far beyond what we normally experience, then we might be utilizing only a fraction of our true potential as conscious beings. The expanded states that become accessible during sleep might represent not anomalies or malfunctions, but glimpses of what consciousness can accomplish when freed from the constraints of maintaining physical awareness. This raises profound questions about the direction of human development. Are we evolving toward greater conscious abilities? Will future generations naturally access during waking life the expanded states that we currently experience only during sleep? The research suggests that with proper training and understanding, people can already begin to bridge these states, maintaining greater awareness during sleep and accessing expanded capabilities while awake. The technology being developed to study and enhance these states is advancing rapidly. Researchers are creating devices that can detect when someone is entering specific sleep stages and provide audio or other stimuli designed to enhance awareness without disrupting the sleep process. Virtual reality systems are being developed that might allow people to share conscious experiences during sleep states. Some researchers are even exploring whether it might eventually be possible to record and replay consciousness experiences, allowing people to share their sleep adventures with others or to revisit particularly meaningful dream encounters. The boundary between inner experience and external reality might become far more permeable than we currently imagine. But perhaps the most significant implication is what this research suggests about the nature of reality itself. If consciousness can indeed operate independently of the brain and access information beyond the reach of the physical senses, then the reality we experience during waking life might be just one layer of a much more complex and interconnected universe. The physical world that seems so solid and separate might actually be embedded within larger dimensions of consciousness that we glimpse during sleep but rarely recognize or remember. The boundaries between self and other, between mind and matter, between possible and impossible, might be far more fluid than our waking experience suggests. This doesn't mean that physical reality is an illusion or that the material world doesn't matter. Rather, it suggests that consciousness and physical reality might be intimately interconnected in ways we're only beginning to understand. The separation between mind and matter that seems so obvious during waking life might dissolve during sleep, revealing a deeper unity that underlies all experience. Every night, as you surrender to sleep, you might be returning to this deeper unity, reconnecting with the source from which both consciousness and physical reality emerge. Your dreams might not be private, isolated experiences, but participations in a vast network of awareness that connects all conscious beings across space and time. The person you think you are during waking life might be like an actor who has become so identified with their role that they've forgotten their true identity. Sleep might be when you step out of character and remember who you really are beneath all the roles and identities you've adopted for navigating physical existence. This perspective doesn't diminish the importance of your waking life or the reality of your physical experience. Instead, it suggests that your waking experience might be enriched and enhanced when you recognize its connection to the deeper dimensions of consciousness that you access during sleep. The integration of sleep consciousness with waking awareness might be the next frontier in human development. Learning to bridge these states, to bring the expanded awareness of sleep into daily life, and to carry conscious intention into sleep states might unlock potentials that we can barely imagine from our current perspective. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you're not just ending another day, you're preparing to embark on a journey into the deepest mysteries of consciousness itself. A journey that might reveal not just what happens when you dream, but what you truly are when all the familiar boundaries of individual existence finally fall away. The adventure that awaits you in sleep might be more real, more meaningful, and more transformative than anything you experience during your waking hours. And tomorrow morning, when you wake up and return to ordinary consciousness, you might be carrying back treasures that will enrich every moment of your waking life. The question isn't whether your consciousness leaves your body every night. The question is whether you're ready to recognize and remember the incredible journeys it takes, and whether you're prepared to integrate the wisdom and capabilities it discovers into your everyday experience of being human. So here we are, at the edge of something that might completely transform how you think about the 8 hours you spend unconscious every night. We've journeyed through neuroscience labs and consciousness research centers, examined cases that defy conventional explanation, and explored possibilities that stretch the very boundaries of what we thought we knew about human awareness. The evidence keeps pointing toward the same remarkable conclusion. Your consciousness might be far more expansive, far more capable, and far more mysterious than you ever imagined. Every night, as your physical body rests, something extraordinary might be happening to the essential you, the part that experiences and dreams and remembers. Whether consciousness literally leaves the body or simply expands beyond its normal boundaries, one thing is becoming clear. Sleep isn't the simple unconscious void we once believed it to be. It might be the most conscious thing you do, a nightly doorway into realms of experience that are vast beyond imagination. Tonight, when you close your eyes and drift into that familiar darkness, remember that you might be embarking on the greatest adventure of your day. Your consciousness, freed from the constraints of maintaining physical awareness, might be exploring dimensions of reality that are more real than anything you experience while awake. The person you think you are might be just the beginning of who you truly are. And every morning, when you wake up with only fragments of memories from the night before, you might be carrying back echoes of journeys that would make the greatest explorers in history weep with wonder. Sweet dreams. Your consciousness has work to do,